Welcome to On Texas Football. It's time for Stay of the Program. I'm Bobby Burton, joined each and every week by Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel. Each week we tackle a topic at the top of the readers' minds or listeners' minds in Stay of the Program that we think impacts the entire program. This episode brought to you by Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm. Guys, this week, Gerry and I and CJ discussed, and what we want to talk about are positions headed into spring ball in 2025. Steve Sarkisian met with the media on Monday. CJ, you were there. We listened to it, etc. The question that we all have that I think is legitimate and what we want to get to here is what positions are going to be improved, fairly similar, or maybe down from a year ago heading into spring. And let's just get started real quick and start with quarterback, where last year, a third-year starter in Quinn Ewers returns. This year, it's a brand-new starter in Arch Manning. Now, does Arch Manning is he more talented than Quinn Ewers? Does he have higher upside? All that stuff? Maybe so, but I don't think you can say definitively the Texas quarterback situation is better this year than it was a year ago. So I'm gonna put it into medium ranged or to slightly negative, at least. And I want to say this and get y'all's thoughts on it. At least until midway through the season. By midway through the season, after he started 7-8 games, I think all bets are off, and we may be talking about a different caliber of quarterback in Arch Manning than even we had in Quinn Ewers. But to start this spring, slightly below the position is. Gerry, you agree or disagree with that? Have anything to add?
Man, it's a tough call for me because the only reason we're having a discussion about a first-year starting quarterback, even can he have a better season than a third-year starting quarterback, is because the guy that departed didn't have the year expected. If that guy if Quinn had the year some people expected, first-round pick, top 10 pick level season, then we're going to say it's going to be a drop-off because it's a first-year starter. But because Quinn had another injury, didn't play up to the level expected, we have a discussion. And because of that, I actually think by the Florida game, I think Arch is a better fit for Sark and what Sark wants to do. And I think in the SEC, having the ability to play on the move at the quarterback position is so vitally important with the athletes in the league and what Texas is going to have to do to take that next step. I'm going to call it a push right now, and I think by a couple of games in the SEC, we're going to say it's going to be better.
So probably 5 to 6 games instead of my 7 to 8.
Yeah.
That's fair. What about you, CJ?
Yes, situationally, I think immediately you'll see improvements. Now, on the flip side, I think there's going to be some moments where it's going to take some time for him to get up to the level in which you saw Quinn really thrive at. And what I mean by that is, some of those fourth down, third down, and you need 1 or 2. I think a quarterback can get you that, right? You won't see the self-sacks as much with Arch because of that mobility. On the flip side, to your point about fitting the Sark offense, the deep ball will certainly be there, right? We've talked about it. We've seen it already. That's going to be a strength of Arch as well. But on the flip side, what was so I guess one of the big strengths of Quinn Ewers is he knew when to check down. He knew when to take a profit at times that kept the chains moving, or at least got him in advantageous downs and distances early on in games. So is that something that Arch will have innate in him? We'll see. But again, one of those things that Quinn was maybe a little bit too good at was just taking the check down and getting 5, 6, 7 yards when there were bigger plays available. So we'll see.
I think all of us are in the same category, basically.
Yeah.
I think we're all, don't have a third-year starting expectations of Quinn Ewers out of Arch Manning out of the gate. Let's wait until he gets his feet wet and go from there. And I think that's fine. Running back's going to be a little bit more controversial, I think, because a year ago, even with Cedric Baxter, Texas lost Christian Clark. Jaden Blue stepped up, scored 14 touchdowns, 8 rushing, 6 receiving. Trey Wisner rushed for more than 1,000 yards. But do you like this running back room right now better than possibly last year's? I'm kind of on the fence where I want to see what James Simon and Ricky Stewart bring, as well as a second-year Jarrett Gibson. I think it's going to be very similar, and I'm worried right now about who's going to provide that big punch in the passing game for Texas because it may not be Trey Wisner, and it's not going to be Cedric Baxter, at least not to start. I think running backs may be a little down from last year or even until we see what Gibson and Simon and Stewart can do, because we know, by the way, Cedric Baxter not going to be available. CJ, what do you think about the running backs?
Yeah, I'm excited for him. And again, I think this is going to be an improved room by the depth alone. Who knows, again, to what level of CJ Baxter or Christian Clark will provide for you on the field. But last year, you were basically at two people, and that's about it. No disrespect to Jarrett Gibson, but the staff clearly didn't trust him enough to throw him into those short yardages consistently. We saw him sporadically throughout the season, but it wasn't enough to say, okay, 3rd and 1, put him out there, right? We still saw Wisner and Blue in those situations, specifically against Ohio State, right? So I just based off of the options alone, you're going to have better talent out there, especially when they go into 12 or 2-back. If they throw a 3-back situation in there, right? It was Ryan Niblett a year ago. He's now at safety. So you have more options. If CJ Baxter comes back and gives you that boost, I'm all for it. To your point about the passing game, look, running backs in the passing game will always be a part of Steve Sarkisian's offense. But with Arch Manning and his proclivity to throw the ball down the field, how much of that will be toned down a little bit versus what we saw with Quinn Ewers? And going back to my point previously, check downs and just throwing the ball at the line of scrimmage, that was a big part of his game. I think that's going to be toned down a bit.
Yeah, they won't have the target that Jaden Blue is, because Jaden Blue had that acceleration out of the backfield that really stunted linebackers' ability to guard him. What do you think, Gerry? You think better, same, kind of down? What do you think?
I think better. I think better. Trey Wisner in year 3 is going to be better than Trey Wisner in year 2.
Fair.
Jarrett Gibson in year 2 will be better than Jarrett Gibson in year 1. I think James Simon is a really good fit in this scheme. I think he's coming in advanced. I think Texas will miss Jaden Blue in the passing game, but in the running game, I don't think they'll miss him. It's somewhat of a lamb killer in that regard. I mean, it's like he wasn't a guy that Texas felt like they could depend on to run the football against quality opponents. So you're not going to miss him in the run game because the Texas staff didn't feel like he was a key part of that. So I think they're going to be better in the run game next year. And I could see it by quite a bit, whether that be Christian Clark getting back, CJ Baxter getting back at some point early in the season, and a freshman like James Simon, who I think is a really good scheme fit at Texas. I think they're going to be improved. I think they're going to also be improved in pass pro next year. More experienced guys, a guy like James Simon coming in who's advanced in that regard due to his dad being a college coach, former college running back slot and NFL guy. I think they're going to be better. And I think they're going to be better fits with Arch Manning in terms of running the football a little bit more inside zone, a little bit more downhill with the different offensive line mixture we're going to talk about coming up. I think it's going to be a better fit with Arch too.
That's interesting because I look at it and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, the one thing we don't account for enough or don't think about enough is how much does Trey Wisner improve?
Yep.
I mean, we really don't account for that much because you think you saw enough of him, but you had 5-10 pounds of muscle on that frame, and how much better inside runner does he become all of a sudden after being somewhat light in the britches as a true sophomore at Texas? All right, we'll go to wide receivers next, where I think there is going to be a somewhat of a drop, but we'll talk about why. First, I want to mention Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm. His group have been helping injured Texans for 20 plus years. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, and think you may be due compensation, make sure you reach out to Adam and his group for a free, no strings attached consultation. They'll give you their thoughts on your situation for absolutely free with no strings attached. Again, LoweyLawFirm.com. Thank you, Adam, for your sponsorship of On Texas Football. All right, let's talk about that wide receiver room. I was looking at last year, Matthew Golden transfer, Isaiah Bond transfer, both proven receivers come in. And then you had two young guys, DeAndre Moore and Jonte Cook, kind of battling it out. And it was survival of the fittest. Moore clearly won that, right? And then you had kind of this phenom come in and play a role in Ryan Wingo. This year, it's Moore and Wingo, and we're looking for answers. I think that most likely the receiver group is going to take a step back unless they bring somebody in from the portal. Now that, again, Moore and Wingo can improve and will improve most likely. But what do y'all think? I mean, it's hard to – Matthew Golden just ran a 4.29. Isaiah Bond. I mean, can Texas just keep reloading like this at wide receiver? I mean, the two previous years, Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell went early in the draft. What are y'all's thoughts on the wide receiver spot? Jerry?
I'm sounding like an optimistic homer on this video. I actually think they may be better.
Wow.
Yeah.
How?
Here's why. Because Isaiah Bond didn't do anything after the Oklahoma game. He was hurt. He wasn't a part of the run to the playoffs and in the playoffs. So one of the guys that was a for sure starter after OU really wasn't that big of a factor. And you lose Matthew Golden, but here's the thing about it. DeAndre Moore's a first-year starter last year. He's going to be a better player in year two. Ryan Wingo should take a big jump from year one to year two as a full-time guy, knowing the scheme. Look, and I do think there's a need in the portal, and CJ will address that. But I think the guys coming back are very talented, and they're now in year two as a starter, co-starter. And I think, you had a guy in Parker Livingston who redshirted, but you have some really talented freshman guys coming in who are getting really rave reviews. And all you need is one of those guys to have a Ryan Wingo similar freshman year. And all of a sudden, we're going to be looking at that and saying maybe they're better because if they stayed healthy. Because Isaiah Bond, he just wasn't healthy. He wasn't a part of the run to the college football semifinal.
I just want to get this out there. When you say have a Ryan Wingo-like effect, remember, I thought Ryan Wingo is the best looking freshman wide receiver I'd seen at Texas since Roy Williams. So to say they have some other guys coming in like that, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute.
I'm talking more production than like if a Jamie French goes for 20, 30 catches and 400 yards, that I'm talking about a production standpoint more so than a, lining it up from a measurable standpoint and talent-wise.
That's fair. What do you think, CJ? Step forward, step back, about the same?
It's too early. I lean it'll be a step back again, just for the sense that I don't know who's going to be the third wide receiver. Right now, I believe it's going to be Parker Livingstone, but I also am very much inclined to believe that Texas is going to go get a portal guy. So what does he look like? What I do know is that the strengths of DeAndre Moore and the strengths of Ryan Wingo and what we've seen from them is going to fit Arch Manning. And so could there be, increased success down the field that would correlate more to, just the optimal, I guess, optics of wide receiver success? Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. But more than that, I don't know who that third guy is going to be until I see them trot out for week one. With that said, you're also losing a first-round wide receiver and a guy who, despite not going and playing his best football the second half of the season, is still getting mock drafted into the second round. So that's a tall task to replace. Not a lot of experience at all, really. You're only returning two guys with catches. So, yeah, I think it'll take a slow ramping up. Ohio State, I don't know if that's going to be a strength of the team, but to your point, later on into the mid-SEC season, yeah, it certainly could develop into one.
I think Gerry we're outvoting Gerry on this one.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion. You and I are on the same page on this, CJ. It's a little too early, but thinking that they're going to get a first rounder out of the portal like they got in Matthew Golden with that kind of productivity, that's a tall ask. I'll just put it that way. No matter how much better DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo become,
right?
Because I think you need three. And Parker Livingstone, you're right. Don't leave him out on the side of the road. I mean, he could very well be a big one. Tight end, I think, takes a step back because of age, not necessarily because of talent. Because I think Jordan Washington has as much talent as Gunnar Helm and or anybody else on the roster at his position. Nick Townsend coming in, Emery Winston, all young guys to mix with Spencer Shannon, who is a third-year player now out of Mater Dei. I think it has to take a step back because Gunnar Helm, my goodness, what a phenomenal year coming out party for him this past season. I think we all probably agree with that. Is that safe to say? Oh, Gerry, CJ said yes. Gerry's got Gerry is so high on some of these players. He's really high on the young guys. Go ahead.
I'll be quick. Look, we've watched Ja'Tavion Sanders break all the tight end records at Texas, and Gunnar Helm came in a year ago and squashed those rather easily. I know he played 16 games, but through the middle of the season, it wasn't even close to what the path he was on. To expect that again from a guy who has 0 career catches, and I don't just mean Jordan Washington, but Spencer Shannon and the young guys, there are 0 career catches right now in that tight end room. I still believe that this is a spot where you should look for Texas to be active in the portal. They were earlier. I think they need to go get a veteran body. Look, being that physical presence on the outside to mix the run game with the pass, that's a tall task. We saw it wasn't always the strength of JT or Gunnar Helm. I'm taking a big step back here.
So I have a big step back week 1, and that will matter against Ohio State. By middle of the SEC play, I'm not so sure, though. Because Texas is going to be a lot more athletic at that position.
More athletic than Gunnar Helm?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, look, Jordan Washington, once Nick Townsend gets his feet wet, those are different level athletes than what Texas has had at tight end. Are they going to be better blocking at that position? Juan Davis gave you something really good in the run game. That, I think, is the question. Gunnar Helm was an effort adequate guy, but he wasn't a guy that you looked at and said, he's really going to help us in the run game. Is a bigger, more physical type of Jordan Washington that long-term? So I'm early in the season, 100% agree with you guys. Late in the season, I'm not so sure. It's going to depend on how quickly Nick Townsend gets involved, because that's a different level athlete you can put out there. You can open up the seam in a different way with the athletes at tight end that they've got, but they got to go prove it. So it's definitely against Ohio State. It's definitely a drop off.
Gerry, you just extremely high on Texas young talent.
I am,
and that's fair. I mean, that's one of the viewpoints.
I think they need somebody in the portal to get them to that point. I think they need help in the portal to help get them to that point, so it doesn't become growth in the game 10 of the season.
Fair. I just think I'm sitting here thinking, you said running back, wide receiver. I mean, that's a lot. Offensive line, definitely a step back in my opinion. They had four 3-year starters last year start on the offensive line, and had a guy that's going to go in the top 2 or 3 rounds in the NFL draft as their 5th one. But how big a step back is really more the question I have. Cole Hudson or Connor Robertson taking over at center most likely. Trevor Gooseby inserted for a mainstay, in Kelvin Banks at left tackle. We'll see what happens at right tackle with Cam Williams leaving early and Brandon Baker, Andre Kojo going after that job. Does Nato Umeozulu or Nate Kibble take over at left guard? A lot of questions, a lot of fair questions. But I think we all agree it's going to go a step down overall, but there might be a diamond in the rough in the run game.
Yeah,
with the 3 guys up the middle. Is that kind of what we're thinking right now?
So I think they're going to take a step back early in the season in pass protection.
Definitely.
Because there's just too much continuity lost there. Even though Cam Williams is a first-year starter, he got to come into an offensive line with a ton of continuity. And when they looked left at each other or looked right in Kelvin Banks' instance, they knew they could trust the guy they were looking at in pass protection. I think that's going to be something that's going to have to be figured out early in the season. I think they're going to be a step back there. I think they're going to be better run blocking guard, center guard next year, though.
I 100% agree.
It won't matter if you're behind the chains because you can't pass pro. But I think they're going to be better in the run game at guard, center guard next year. And that's not a knock on the guys that graduate. It's just part of natural growth in programs sometimes.
Yeah, and to again, pin this all back on Arch Manning, if you're going to have an offensive line that's weak in one spot, pass protection would probably where you want it because of his ability to extend and escape the pocket. Again, if this was Quinn Ewers, I'd be sitting there saying, "Ooh, this is going to be a huge weakness." But again, the legs are a bonus there. But I'm with you, Gerry. I think you have a bigger average weight height on the interior with DJ, with Nato, with Cole Hudson. Again, I think it fits very well for those short yardages, tough to gain yards. But we'll have to see. But I do think that would be the one area that I look at and say, that's a very high ceiling this early on.
And that's part of the reason I went where I did at running back, because I do think they're going to be better, more effective running the football inside next year. And I think the pieces are there for Texas to come closer to maximize that. Like if you had Jaden Blue back this year, he's not an inside runner. No matter how bad people want him to be, that's not what he is. But you have guys that I think can take advantage of that more if you've improved in that area in the run game. And I do think that's going to make the running back position improved.
Fair enough. All right, defensive line. Let's start at edge, where I think Texas, even with the loss of Barron Sorrell, will be better. Colin Simmons is a year older. Ethan Burke, a year older. Zena Umeozulu, a year older. Colton Vosnick, hopefully you get him for the whole year after sitting out from injury. Trey Moore returns. Better? I mean, is there any – Trey Moore, by the way, talk about guys that needed 6 games to get their feet underneath them.
Yep.
It didn't matter. And I will say this. You had, other than Michigan, those first 6 games, you didn't really play much, right? And he got his feet underneath him in the last half of the season. Trey Moore was a really good football player for Texas.
Tremendous.
Yeah, and so that's what we're talking about with people getting their sea legs or getting their feet wet. Trey Moore is a perfect example of a guy that came in and is exactly like that. Any questions that the pass rush, I mean, even if you include Brad Spence in that coming at linebacker, I mean, Texas has guys that may be able to go at people in droves off the edge. We all agree. Do we even need to talk about that is my question?
Well,
Do we all just nod our heads and say yes?
I think yes, but CJ and Bobby, I think y'all need to address this because I do think it's early in the season. Barron Sorrell against the run was really, really good.
Yes.
And are you going to be as good against the run? Now, it only matter in one game. I think from a pass rush standpoint, absolutely better.
I'll tell you, Colton Vosnick is good against the run now.
Yep.
If he's healthy. And you saw what he did against Ohio State, frankly.
There's a level of quickness off the edge, Bobby, that I think will be very solid against the run. The one concern I might have is when you face an Ohio State, you face a Georgia, you face a Florida with those big tackles, and you go small with the Trey Moore and Colin Simmons, you're susceptible. So that's the one maybe concern there, but that's personnel package. Because again, you got a 6'6" Colton Vosnick, you got a 6'7" Ethan Burke ready to file in. So I like this room. It's probably my favorite room on the team at the moment.
Well, yes. I mean, without question, right? Defensive tackle is a different story. You're relying on 3 guys you don't really know what you have because they haven't played a snap at the University of Texas. Right? I mean, Cole Brevard, Travis Shaw, those guys, along with Alex January coming in early. Then you don't know whether Josiah Sharma, Melvin Hills, Myron Charles. What are y'all's thoughts on defensive tackle? It has to be a step back, you would think, because Jermaine Lole was surprising, in my opinion, last year. Really just pleasant surprise. Bill Norton had some outstanding plays. The stop against Clemson and up the middle was terrific. But also you had the veterans, Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton, kind of have breakthrough years themselves. Does defensive tackle take a step back? On paper, I think it does. I don't know if we know and have a good enough feel about the guys that came in to say that for sure, though. What are y'all's thoughts?
I think we're waiting on the portal, right? CJ, we're waiting on the portal. There's a need for one more guy. So here's where I'm going to say. I actually think they may be better against the run and not as disruptive. Look, I think Cole Brevard's going to be really good against the run. I think Travis Shaw is going to be really good against the run. I think Hero Kanu has played enough football at Ohio State and practiced against enough guys that are NFL players. I think those guys, Alex January in year 2, and Melvin Hills is a competitive rotational guy. I think they may be better anchoring against the run as a whole on the interior because I think Lole and Norton really brought something to Texas there. But I'm not sure they're going to be as disruptive unless they get an athletic disruptor in the portal, CJ.
Yeah, I'm looking at how they've kind of constructed this room at the moment. And, Gerry, that's kind of how I view it. Just don't get pushed off the ball. We'll take the lack of pass rush because of what we have on the edges.
Yeah.
But, look, 6'4", 6'5", 330 is basically everybody in that room at the moment. What can Travis Shaw give you is a big one for me. What can Alex January give you? Because I think we all believe that next step for him is, again, a very positive step forward. If he gives you something that you can get 40, 35 snaps out of a game, look, I think you're in a good spot. But again, whoever they add out of the portal, not to mention what a Justice Terry or Josiah Sharma or Myron Charles can give you, you got bodies, but it's an unknown. I think it takes a step back based off specifically the losses of Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins.
All right, going there, linebacker next, guys. Anthony Hill, Leon Galafau, Ty Anthony Smith, Brad Spence's addition is huge because it gives them another adult in the room. You lose Mo Blackwell and David Benda, two dyed-in-the-wool Longhorns, burnt orange through and through. I still think this group's going to now be better. A third-year Anthony Hill, a third-year Leon Galafau, a second-year Ty Anthony Smith. You add Brad Spence, Bo Barnes might be in there. I don't know that it's going to be – I think it's somewhat similar to defensive end where they lost a key player or key component in Barron Sorrell. At linebacker, they lost two key components, but I still think the linebacker room should be much better than a year ago. Y'all agree?
Go ahead and take it, Gerry.
I think this is going to be the most improved position on the team and the best it's been at Texas in a long time. And I say that because, look, Anthony Hill, year 3, he's going to be better as an overall linebacker in year 3. Leon Galafau, solid player. Ty Anthony Smith, I think, may be he's going to be a future pro. But Brad Spence is different because that is SEC size and athleticism and production. And what he can do, he gives you so much more versatility at linebacker. And with that natural growth of the other guys in year 3 and Ty Anthony Smith in year 2, and then really good freshman Elijah Barnes behind him, they have more depth, they have more size, they have more SEC size, athleticism combo. I think this position is going to be on paper. We'll see how it plays out, the best it's been in years at Texas. Years.
CJ?
I don't need to add a whole lot. I'm just thinking Anthony Hill, 6'3", 235, 240. Brad Spence, 238. Bo Barnes, 240. You got a lot of size. You got a lot of speed. You got a lot of production. Not to mention Leon Galafau, Ty Anthony Smith, and what will eventually become Jonathan Cunningham. But, yeah, I love this room too.
I would say this. Don't forget Trey Moore, working a little linebacker too. And that might be a pass rush package that nobody wants to see. Frankly. All right. Secondary, nobody that doesn't wear burnt orange, by the way. Secondary, let's take all of those guys as a whole, because I think we can sit here and lose the forest through the trees if we try to pick out safety versus corner versus nickel. I think they take a step back, and I think this is my biggest concern with the entire team in 2025. It's by far. And I mean that in as nice a way as possible. It's not the offensive line that concerns me as much. I think they're going to be down, but I think, they're going to be plausible and capable at a certain level. But I'm telling you, the secondary worries me because you're losing two guys in Jahdae Barron and Andrew Makuba that are not just good. They're not just athletic. They're not just talented. They were smart, man. I mean, yes, you get Michael Taft back, but I just don't know how a team that relies on 5 DBs, 6 or 7 DBs actually in total, how you lose those two guys that between them started 80 games in college. I mean, how do you replace that? So I think they've got to take a step back. Now, do they have young guys that are talented? Absolutely. But man, talent does not replace experience and know-how and execution. I mean, how good was Jahdae Barron coming up on those bubble screens in the nobody ran a bubble screen against Texas after week 2.
Right.
I mean, they just stopped trying. Right. And so I worry about the most worrisome part of the team to me right now, secondary, because they were so darn good a year ago. Gerry or CJ, whoever wants to go first.
I think that cornerback spot that is now vacant because of the departure of Jahdae Barron, that's the biggest concern for me. Maybe not necessarily the whole secondary, but who is going to step up and play opposite of Manny Muhammad? Look, that's a tall ask, and you're going to have a very young, inexperienced corner. I know Kobe Black got some run, but look, it wasn't a whole lot. And when he was on the field, we saw it against Arkansas. They said, hey, Andrew Armstrong, go deep. And they had some success doing that. Now Clemson picked on Manny Muhammad as well. So is that cornerback spot going to be up to par what we saw last year? Probably not. But look, I trust a lot of what I saw of Jelani McDonald. And I don't want to diminish anything that Andrew Mukuba did for Texas because he was tremendous. But I trust what I saw in that room to not have a significant drop-off. And, of course, that's also dependent upon how Derek Williams comes back for injury. But I'll ask you guys this. Are we to believe that a Dwayne Aquina coming back to campus is going to propel this room, a Mark Orfe on the outside? Is it too early to tell? Because, let's not forget, before last year, we were saying it's going to be a make-it-or-break-it year for not just Blake Gideon, but Terry Joseph. So I think that there is going to be a lot of improvement in that room this year, and I'm not ready to say that it's going to be a significant drop off the way that you would expect without a Thor Pointer and another guy that's going to go second, third, fourth round.
I think Scotty Hazelton at Nichols coach brought so much that even with bringing back Dwayne Aquina, it's not going to be this fundamental change. I think now I do believe to your point about Mark Orfe and typically just how Steve Sarkisian wants to coach and recruit, you're going to see more man corner play over time because Sark knows he's going to need to challenge guys, right? But I don't necessarily think Aquina in and of himself brings back this whole thing because at the end of the day, it's players, man. And you mentioned Derek Williams. That's a great one. Xavier Filsaime is one that we're waiting on to see what he does. Jordan Johnson-Rebel. Wardell Mack is a guy that
Jonah Williams
tabs on. Yeah, I mean, Gerry, your thoughts. Do you agree with me, Gerry, that you think this is the one that is the big?
Yeah, it's the biggest question. It's the biggest question for me due to the level of playmaking, instinctive, smart playmaking we saw.
That we lost.
Yes, that we saw last year and lost. The key for me is going to be, and I know the Jalen Gilboa corner talk is there and Jelani Moore full-time nickel is there, but when Manny Muhammad came in, he turned heads to the point of it took some worry away. We're like, "Ooh, man, we know he can play." He was creating turnovers early on. His technician carried over, even though he's not blazing fast, but you felt more comfortable. I think this spring is really big for me to hear, okay, Santana Wilson looks like a future multi-year starter. Oh, this Cade Phillips kid may actually be as good as he was ranked long-term. One of those young guys steps up and does some things that Manny did that first spring Manny was here. And because remember, Santana Wilson didn't have spring practice last year. He took a traditional enrolled June redshirt year. I think it's going to be key for one of those young guys to come out of this spring, and we're saying we're going to say similar things that we heard about Manny Muhammad. I think that would be big for the other corner position, to CJ's point. Then the juggle of the nickel position, I think, is going to be big with Jalen Gilboa at corner, how they're going to juggle that out throughout the spring. And then you need one of these really athletic young safeties to step up, I think. Just bring some of that pure speed because you're not going to match what Mukuba brought. So how do you offset it? You have to offset it with just pure athleticism playmaking from a young kid.
Jonah Williams ready to go by.
Yeah, no spring practice is big there for him.
Yeah. All right. Last thing we need to mention before we leave, and it's worth it. Kicker, punter. I mean, right? I mean, we have to. They'll be better at punter. Jack Bomeister, the transfer from Utah, averaged 45 yards a boot.
Yeah.
We're going to be better at punter. Is bottom line. Now, that's not a knock on Michael Kern, who is a true freshman, average right at what, 40? Is that about right? But 5 yards is fine. That's not bad at all. Kicker, though, I mean, Will Stone and Bert Auburn are both back. It's got to be better than 2024, but it's the same personnel, so why would it be? Isn't it just even?
Oh, well,
I mean, what do you? I mean, theoretically,
I believe in bounce back seasons a lot of times for guys like that. So if Bert Auburn wins the job, he was really good his first couple of years, right?
Yeah, he was.
I don't have any reason to believe it would continue that direction as a senior. I mean, that's some real scar tissue he's got to overcome, though. I mean, that you want to talk about all the players returning at Texas. When that guy sits at home on his couch, he has the most scar tissue of any player in the program. It's not even close because he can go back in his head and think about 3 or 4 kicks, and one of them cost you an SEC championship. I mean, that's a lot of scar tissue for a young guy to have. If he overcomes that and there's positive signs with the staff, then he'll have a bounce back year. But it is a lot of scar tissue.
Yeah, the thing I'm worried about is that first miss. If it's at home, especially, you're going to hear it.
At Ohio State,
do you think he'll get booed?
I don't necessarily mean booze, but the groans are going to be I mean, we hear it all the time when Arch Manning runs onto the field. The applause, the uproar of the crowd, just the excitement. But Texas fans, you talk about scar tissues and kind of that damage it did emotionally there. I think it's going to be pretty tough for that first miss at home, regardless of distance. But to your point, Gerry, I think that water finds its level eventually, and we just hit as big a drought as you'll see with Burt Auburn. I would have to imagine it gets better, but to this point, punting is going to be significantly better. The number one way you can help the kicking situation is Sarkisian punching it in the red zone and not being left out for these 33, 38, 42-yard field goals.
It's very interesting. You mentioned the SEC championship game, Gerry. I just, when I think of Burt Auburn right now, I think of the dread I felt in my pit of my stomach when he hit the upright in overtime before overtime against Arizona State. I was like, oh, I mean, that was the groan to CJ's point. If that would have happened in DKR, oh boy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. CJ's throwing it. All right. That's going to do it. I need to say thank you once more to our sponsor, Adam Lowy over at the Lowy Law Firm. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, and think you might be due compensation and want a free, no strings attached consultation, reach out to Adam and his group, loweylawfirm.com. Thank you, Adam, for your time and commitment on Texas football. And Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel, likewise, thank you for your time and commitment as well. Hope you guys enjoyed this week's State of the Program. We've got more tonight coming with the live stream, as well as tomorrow morning, coffee and football. I'm off to go watch a basketball game this afternoon.
Oh,
they have to talk about that in the evening. You guys have a good one. And for CJ, Gerry, as well as our producer, Matt Hutchinson, hook 'em.